Well, my friends, after weeks and weeks of waiting, WandaVision is finally complete with a somewhat okay finale, but a mostly great show. And to be honest with you, I had mixed feelings going into WandaVision because although the whole sitcom aspect of it felt new and original, I was kind of questioning how it was going to go because, it could not work in execution. But I would say, especially at the beginning, the sitcom element really worked well in its favor. But yeah, you could say for the first three episodes, not much in terms of plots really progressing, and that could really put off a lot of people. But I'm glad to say that it was definitely a strong start. I'd say the best part of this show is easily the performances from both Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany. They play these characters really well, and they have great chemistry, which is something that I think was kind of lacking in the Avengers movies, was Wanda and Vision's relationship, but it really shines here. Now, in the fourth episode is when things begin to change and we get more of an idea of what's been happening in this show. We get introduced to characters like Monica Rambeau, Darcy Lewis, and Jimmy Woo, which are the characters that we see in the human side of the world, and basically there's two plot points going on, everything in the sitcom world and the real world. Now, although I didn't really like the whole sword plot line of things as much as the sitcom world, I definitely think that these three characters made it a lot more enjoyable than it could have been, and at least it did have impact on the story. I did like the balance between the two sets of characters because sometimes it's just a bit boring to see just the sitcom world for a full episode and then just the regular world the full episode. But once we get to the fifth episode, it's definitely great to see the balance and how they correspond from each other. This whole season is filled with a lot of fun stuff, and my personal favorite moment is when Quicksilver shows up, especially for the Halloween episode. It was definitely great to see Evan Peters from the X-Men universe play him, even if it didn't really pay off well in the end. I really like how each episode was just a different decade and time and how it does the style of its sitcom approach, like how in the 50s it's similar to the Dick Van Dyne Show, and once it gets to the late 90s and early 2000s, how it kind of has a take on Malcolm in the Middle. Although I'm not a big sitcom fan, it is nice to see all the love and care the show went into to making all these references, and it was just a lot of fun to see. Now, obviously, once we get to the ending of the show, things get a lot weirder. Agnes is actually revealed to be Agatha Harkness, a witch from the Salem witch trials, and she's revealed to be wanting Wanda's powers, and that's why she's been there all along. I especially like the episode where we get to see the origin of how Wanda got her powers and how she created this whole sitcom world. And just in general, it really gives a lot more depth to her character as well as her and Vision's relationship. But then after all of that, we get the final episode, which is basically just typical Marvel action. Wanda fights Agatha, Vision fights other Vision. I'm not really complaining about it, although some people will probably be disappointed to just see the final episode be typical Marvel action. I still just really enjoyed it, and it's really impressive to see how much they can do with a TV show budget. But all in all, I did have certain problems with this ending. I definitely didn't like how they wasted Quicksilver just for a dick joke. This is one thing I can actually understand why Marvel fans will be angry. I don't really care too much for fan theories because Marvel fans were really just setting themselves up for disappointment when they were talking about Mephisto and introducing more X-Men. But to think that they really brought in Evan Peters to play Quicksilver and just waste him just like that, with no actual connections to the multiverse like we all thought, that there is disappointing. I also really don't understand what happened to White Vision because after this whole philosophical conversation, he just kind of flies away. I don't really know what happened to him. I definitely will say that the show kind of surprised me with leaving Wanda just to be alone instead of kind of turning more on the villainous side. You could make complaints on how poorly it handles the sitcom world and how it mixes with the real life stuff. I didn't really have the highest expectations going into this, so I was still pleasantly surprised after everything I saw. But overall, I'd say WandaVision is definitely a great show and definitely worth your time, especially if you're an MCU fan, and I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.